The termination letter fluttered to the floor before anyone noticed the little girl standing outside the glass conference room. She couldn't have been older than 8. She clutched a lunchbox decorated with faded cartoon stars and whispered through the doorway, "Dad, I forgot your medicine." No one answered. Her father was already walking away with a cardboard box in his hands. Inside the room, Monica Reeves leaned back in her chair and allowed herself one quiet smile. She had finally done what headquarters wanted. Labor costs would drop. Her division would hit its quarterly target. Then, 20 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. The company's CEO stepped onto the floor unexpectedly. His first question wasn't about profits. It was about the man who had just left. Who let him go? The entire office fell silent. Daniel Brooks had spent 11 years maintaining one of the country's busiest manufacturing plants. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't management. He was the maintenance supervisor, the person everyone called when machines failed at 3 in the morning or when a production line suddenly stopped. His hands were permanently scarred from years of repairing equipment no one else wanted to touch. 3 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a long illness, leaving him to raise his daughter, Lily, alone. Every morning began the same. Prepare breakfast, pack Lily's lunch, drive her to school, work 10-hour shifts, pick her up, help with homework. Repeat. He was always tired, but he never complained. His coworkers often joked that Daniel could fix anything except his own exhaustion. Monica had arrived only 6 months earlier. Young, brilliant, determined to prove she belonged. Headquarters expected immediate improvements after several disappointing financial reports. She wasn't cruel. She was scared of failing. Every meeting revolved around numbers. Reduce overtime. Cut unnecessary positions. Increase efficiency. When Daniel's department appeared over budget, spreadsheets suggested his role had become redundant. She never walked the factory floor long enough to understand why everyone depended on him. The decision looked simple on paper. It wasn't. After leaving the building, Daniel placed his box into his aging pickup truck. Inside were family photos, a coffee mug Lily had painted in kindergarten, and a small toolbox he'd bought with his first paycheck decades ago. He looked at the factory one last time. Not with anger, with sadness. He wondered how he would explain everything to Lily. Before starting the engine, he noticed something strange. Smoke drifted from one of the distant loading bays. It was thin, almost invisible. Most people would have driven away. Daniel couldn't. He parked again. Inside the warehouse, a conveyor motor had begun overheating. Workers assumed the emergency sensors would stop the system. They didn't. Daniel instantly recognized the smell. Electrical insulation. Seconds from ignition. He rushed toward the control panel. Someone shouted, "You don't work here anymore." Daniel ignored them. He climbed over stacked pallets, reached the emergency disconnect, and shut down the entire line just before sparks erupted beneath the machinery. Within moments, maintenance crews arrived. No fire, no injuries, no disaster. Daniel quietly walked back toward the parking lot. No one stopped him. 40 minutes later, CEO Richard Hale landed by helicopter after hearing about the near accident during a regional safety inspection. He personally reviewed the incident footage. The video confused him. A man carrying a termination box had prevented what engineers estimated could have caused millions in damage. Richard paused the recording. "Who is that?" Someone answered softly. "Daniel Brooks." "And where is he?" "He was laid off this morning." Richard looked around the conference room. "Who let him go?" No one spoke. Monica finally raised her hand. "I approved it." Richard didn't yell. That somehow made the silence even heavier. Instead of calling another meeting, Richard asked for something unusual. "I want to see his employee file. Not his salary. Not his performance metrics. Everything." The records told a different story than the spreadsheets. Daniel had trained nearly every technician currently employed. He had voluntarily covered holiday shifts so younger parents could stay home. He once repaired a broken cooling system during a snowstorm without claiming overtime. He had quietly donated vacation days to co-workers battling illness. None of it appeared on financial reports. Yet it had shaped the entire culture of the factory. Richard closed the folder. "We measured cost," he said quietly. "We never measured character." Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his garage repairing bicycles for neighborhood kids. It wasn't for money. It simply kept his hands busy while his heart caught up with reality. Lily watched him tighten a loose chain. "Are you going back tomorrow?" Daniel smiled gently. "I don't know." She nodded, pretending to understand. Then she placed the lunchbox she'd carried earlier onto his workbench. I think they needed you more than we do. Daniel laughed for the first time all day. Kids had a way of making impossible moments feel lighter. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Not a limousine, not television cameras, just Monica. She looked nothing like the confident executive from yesterday. She looked exhausted. She held Daniel's toolbox. I think I forgot to return something. Daniel invited her inside. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Monica admitted the truth. I never asked anyone who you were. She explained the pressure, the deadlines, the fear of becoming another failed executive. I looked at charts instead of people. Daniel listened quietly. He could see genuine regret, not excuses. An hour later, Richard Hale arrived. He offered Daniel his position back immediately, with higher pay, better benefits, a leadership role. Daniel surprised everyone. I'll come back, he said, but only if something changes. Richard waited. Daniel continued. Every employee deserves one conversation before becoming a number. Monica lowered her eyes. Richard slowly nodded. Done. That policy spread across every company location within months. Managers were required to meet personally with employees before major staffing decisions. Many layoffs still happened. Business was still business. But stories were finally heard before decisions were made. Sometimes those conversations revealed hidden value. Sometimes they revealed simple humanity. Either way, people mattered again. A year later, Lily visited the factory for Family Day. Workers greeted Daniel like he'd never left. Monica had become one of the company's most respected leaders, not because she never made mistakes, but because she never stopped learning from the biggest one. Near the entrance hung a small bronze plaque. It didn't mention profits. It didn't mention production records. It simply read, every machine has a manual. Every person has a story. Read both before making decisions. Daniel smiled when he saw Lily reading it aloud. She looked up at him. You fixed more than machines. He squeezed her shoulder. No, he said softly. We all did. As the factory hummed around them, no one remembered the quarterly report that had once justified one man's dismissal. But everyone remembered the day a single father walked back into danger after losing everything, because doing the right thing mattered more than holding a job. And in the end, the greatest leaders weren't the ones who made the hardest decisions the fastest. They were the ones who never forgot there was a human being standing behind every employee number.